Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Atomi Brainwaves, our podcast on education for educators. Brainwaves is produced by our wonderful team here at Atomi. What is Atomi? It's an online teaching and learning platform for secondary education. We provide engaging, curriculum-specific video and text lessons for over 190 subjects, as well as matching quizzes and exam practice that can be used for both learning and formative assessment. We also provide powerful analytics that can help teachers diagnose how their students are progressing and zero in on who might need a little bit of extra help. Our goal is to help make life easier for our teachers, give them more time to work on the most important things, and ultimately help to generate better outcomes. If you want to find out more about Atomi, head over to our main site at getatomi.com and feel free to try it out for free. Today's episode is a special edition and comes as our response to the global pandemic caused by coronavirus. Several schools have had full or partial closures due to coronavirus scares, and we'd like to help where we can. If your school has to take drastic action, we're extending complimentary access to our platform. This will provide teachers with an online library of curriculum-specific Stage 6 content and assessments to minimize any disruption to student learning. If you'd like to explore this, don't hesitate to email us at schools@getatomi.com. In the meantime, we've put together this episode with the help of our resident teaching expert Sue, special guest Adam Ware of Instructure and Canvas, and Atomi co-founder Tom O'Donoghue to talk about online learning. We discussed how teachers can overcome the challenges that school closures pose and outlined the best strategies for identifying and mastering the right technologies to make the best out of the current situation.
Are you going to teach us anything?
What, you want me to teach you something? You want to learn something? All right. You got it!
Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition episode of Atomi Brainwaves. I'm your host Simon. Today I've got two guests in the room with me. One is our resident teaching expert, former head of English, digital learning leader for curriculum and pedagogy and director of curriculum, Sue. And the other is Adam Ware, Senior Customer Success Manager for Instructure Australia, responsible for the implementation and adoption of Canvas, a course management system that supports online learning and teaching across K-12, universities, and further education providers. Welcome, Sue. Welcome, Adam.
Hey, Simon. How you going?
Thanks, Simon.
Not too bad. Adam, I hear you are suffering from serious withdrawal symptoms as the sporting world shuts itself down.
Yeah, as an avid competitor, it hurts. A big race that I was scheduled to run's been cancelled, which hurts. But look, it hurts a little bit, but in the scale of all things, it's probably absolutely minuscule thing to worry about. So, just got to take a few deep breaths.
Sue, are you missing the sporting world just as much?
Yeah, I'm crying over it, actually. No, I'm not missing the sporting world. I mean, I'm more concerned about going to my local supermarket and not getting into a fight with people, which is the other crazy aspect at the moment. Although I heard on the news this morning that it's turned from toilet paper buying to office supplies, and that it's places like Officeworks now where are selling out and being, products are being mass bought there as people move to working from home. So the world's a little bit crazy in Australia at the moment.
Interesting. I really thought it was going to be food that was going to be the item of choice, but there you go. Crazy times. So why are we breaking from our structure and having a special edition episode of Brainwaves? Well, for the same reason that so many people around the world are being forced to break from their ordinary routines, because we are in the midst of this global pandemic caused by the novel coronavirus. Now, if we were to sit here and try and list the multitude of ways that people's livelihoods have been affected across the globe, it would take us quite a long time and would be quite distressing, I'm sure, in lots of ways. But we are an education podcast, and our focus is on the education world. It's not going to be all doom and gloom for us, because the aim of our discussion today is to talk about what we can do to combat the effects that this pandemic is going to have on teaching and learning, with a specific focus on online learning. So, as I say, online learning is going to be the main thrust of the conversation. But before we get into that, I thought it might be worthwhile spending some time just getting an update on where exactly we stand in terms of how schools have been affected by the coronavirus in Australia. So, Sue, we'll start with you. Where do we stand?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting and evolving few weeks, and it sort of changes quite rapidly. The state at the moment is that government schools are still open and employing social distancing. So trying to, so anything like gatherings of assemblies, sports, events, anything into school, etc., have all been cancelled. Some external providers have been cancelled. So I've got a little kid in kindy, and our school has stopped sort of school banking. Scripture classes have stopped. So anything where someone outside's coming in has been limited. If there's a confirmed case of COVID-19, then the school sort of closes for a day. Big cleaning, and then obviously students are isolated, but then most of the students are allowed back in. I think down in, Victoria, a few private schools have closed already. Like they've actually, some have started school holidays earlier. They're a week earlier than us anyway, I think, in terms of the school term. So some of them have, sort of gone on holiday a little bit earlier. And I know that some schools in Sydney, like St Andrews and Pimble's Ladies College, they've done sort of tests of online learning, trialled. St Andrews sent Year 9 students home for a day and trialled online learning for a day, which seemed to be really a productive experience for both teachers and students. So I think there's a general sense of getting ready for what may come. Yeah. Yeah.
And I suppose that question of what may come, it's all speculation at this point, which has to be recognized. But Adam, just to turn to you for a sec, with so many examples from different parts around the world of what has happened. I'm in Ireland at the moment, and over here, all schools have shut. As I say, it's all speculation, but I guess the question is, it's all about being prepared for any eventuality, isn't it?
Yeah, that's completely right. I mean, we're seeing quite an influx of questions and queries coming in from our particular clients ranging across various markets, but a lot of them are somewhere along in their adoption. So in other words, they've made the plan and they're rolling this out. It's either accelerated their plans to obviously get the scale that they need to get it sorted, or some are going down a completely different tangent, depending on resources, availability, and also the digital teaching skills of staff, which is something that needs to be really taken into consideration when you do something like this.
Yeah, which is, I guess, leads us right into the main meat of our discussion, which is online learning, because it's important. As we've touched on many times on this podcast already, its importance grows year on year with new resources. But in a time like this, it takes on an entirely new complexion and different level and type of importance. So, Sue, I guess, can you talk to us a little bit about that increased importance? What does it look like now? How important is online learning at the moment in response to this crisis?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of schools who have an element of online learning, but blended into the classroom mainly. So mainly talking sort of senior school here rather than obviously primary. I think that's a whole different kettle of fish. Yeah. But looking at the senior school element, a lot of places have, either an LMS such as Canvas, or they've got, say, Google Classrooms or some aspect of a way of structuring learning online, but they may not heavily use it. It might just be sort of something that they do as part of their, blend into the classroom and use it sort of sporadically. And I think what's happening now is people are sort of revisiting that and thinking, okay, if we go into some sort of crisis management mode and we are looking to the future for, delivering all of our content online at the moment, what does that look like? Are we prepared for that? It is, as Adam said, a sort of, massive upskilling of staff to, do that quite quickly. But in terms of the importance of online learning, I think it's probably come to the forefront of people's minds to see just how vital it is to have that access. And that's something we've covered in the podcast before, you know, when we've said it's amazing if you can have your content available face-to-face and online, because, you know, that kid who gets glandular fever and is away all term, you know, they are still included in the class and in the curriculum. But I think now we're seeing that as, rather than being the exception, we're looking at what if that is the rule? What does it look like if that's the main case for schools and for students, and if learning's going in that direction? Maybe for the short term, obviously the importance has significantly increased.
Yeah, and I guess if we're looking at it as you say, as now more so the rule than the exception in a moment like this, I want to kind of get your thoughts before we dive into the weeds about this, of to what extent we should be viewing this as online learning, as a, you know, internet classroom, so to speak. To what extent should we be looking at that as a replacement for the classroom, trying to replicate exactly what the classroom brings, or framing it instead more as a different alternative which we need to adapt to? Basically, and Adam, I'll turn to you for this one. To what extent is the adaptation trying to get the online learning to fit what exists in the classroom versus trying to get the classroom dynamic to now change to fit the online learning?
It's actually coming back to what I was saying before. Where you are in your journey will depend. I mean, I know some schools use, say, for instance, Canvas to actually provide all the materials and everything before the class, and then they use the class time to then run through any questions or queries like that. So for them to then scale that to online, because everyone's already using it and flowing through it, they can then obviously change that face-to-face thing at the end via a webinar or through an integration or something like that. So that's not a big change. Rolling back from going to having a strict webinar when you're just going online and teaching, like that's something completely different. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of schools out there. I mean, we've been, like, I'll use the word hammered, like not too quietly, but people have just been going, yeah, we'll just get a conference, we'll just put it online. That to me just is not a thorough enough way to actually understand what's actually going on. Are the students engaged? How this is working? Yep. So the combination is kind of a bit key, but you know, Sue mentioned before, you got to practice. Yeah.
Yeah. And exactly, combination is key. And, you know, you're coming from that perspective of Canvas as well, touching a little bit on that. These are unprecedented times, guys, an unprecedented podcast, and we're going to make an unprecedented move and bring Tom, our producer, into the mix as well on this one. He's usually the silent partner in the corner, but today he's ready to pipe in. Tom, I guess sort of the same question to you, this idea of, you know, replacing the classroom or seeing it as something new from the perspective of yourself as one of the co-founders here at Atomi. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I kind of echo that sentiment really, which is that traditionally a lot of schools would have looked to implement a blended or remote learning program over months or years, and there would be a process and a rollout and, you know, building programs and developing resources to put together and all that. And so some schools are now faced with the prospect of trying to do that in days, let alone, you know, the weeks that they might have. So it's certainly a different journey. And you're right that in terms of the whole idea of let's just throw this onto a video conference is, I think, like, everyone will learn quite quickly that that's a very, very hard thing to do.
Well, to make it effective.
Yeah, exactly.
We're doing pretty well on video conference ourselves right now.
So yeah,
you never know.
Even still, like, we're having a conversation as well. We're certainly not trying to, you know, issue tasks and mark assignments and grade work and collaborate on documents and all the kind of stuff that you really want to do as part of a really sort of sophisticated, you know, learning program. So I think, like, there's going to be, I think most schools will sort of look at some mix of synchronous time where they want to jump on a video conference and talk to their kids. And I guess for many teachers, that will be sort of the default mode that they're used to being in terms of, like, the classroom. But there has to be realistically this push towards some type of asynchronous learning mode where there's pre-prepared lessons or tasks for students to access, simply because, you know, the learning experience is just profoundly better online, and it supports a lot more learning modes. But also, I think, just simply speaking, if teachers are doing their full schedule on video conferencing, back to back, and trying to pull off these lessons, and trying to, do something that will work, somewhat effectively over video conference, they're going to be absolutely flat out in just trying to do that, let alone having any time to actually sort of prepare the types of lessons that really work well online. So I think it's going to be a bit of an interesting dilemma, but I think the schools that are most prepared will do the best job of getting that online learning program prepared early, so that there's more things ready for them to go, so that their teachers aren't scrambling last minute and are forced to do that sort of asynchronous.
Because it's really, what's coming across for me is really it's about this being something that's as much of the teacher's friend, as much of the teacher's companion, as easy as possible for them to use to balance all of these different things that you're talking about. That's really, I guess, the key in a moment like this where it's all happening so quickly for an online resource.
Yeah. I think it's just a lot to expect a teacher to
transition.
Suddenly,
That transition from saying this is something I have done, and probably some of those teachers that have been in the teaching realm for such a period of time, going from this is the way I've always done it to I have to do it like this, otherwise my kids are simply not going to learn. I should be getting 12 months or a longer period of time. Yeah. I've literally got 2 weeks. So it's all about, teacher collaboration, about building content. Hey, can you work with us to creating a classroom for this topic? Can you work class? Let's share all this. Let's make it so we've got all these resources, because that's probably where I fear most of the teaching and learning queries are coming from, is the how. And as you mentioned before, a few schools have, they're sending a year group home to trial it. That's really smart preparation. But it's getting the more and more serious the situation becomes, obviously the more heightened the people get around it.
It was interesting to, sorry, Tom, it was interesting to see the St Andrews, the girl from there was a girl from Year 9 interviewed about the experience of learning at home. And one of the things the headline for it was that she said it made her feel like an adult for a day, which was quite an interesting sort of take that, I guess the kids see parents more and more kind of doing work from, obviously computer work, that kind of thing. And so her take was that, she was sort of self-directed. She had some personalisation. Obviously, she had some scope of time and pace and place, and also, where she physically worked in her home. But it made her feel like an adult for a day. So there is hope that, once they've got over the novelty of being sort of at home or all being on a Google Doc at once and what that looks like, and it's also new and fun, that after that, good learning will still happen.
That student sounds way more mature than me.
That's...
And just listening to that example, I guess it calls to mind the idea that, in one way, look, we're all scrambling for positives within this, but in terms of online learning, it is an arena that to a certain extent you would say could suit some students. We talk about how much more technology literate students are nowadays, people of that age group. So, obviously to turn the focus from just a second from the teachers adapting to students adapting to it, it could be said that students are, by virtue of their familiarity with, devices and the online world and technology, they're relatively well placed to be able to adapt to this quickly.
Yeah. So
this one's for the room.
There's one big caveat to that, which is I think that a lot of students, they may be very adept with the technology and, jumping on a video conference, or, maybe no problem for them. Spending, 5 or so hours moderating their own, workflow, making sure they're actually, making progress and having that level of agency over their own learning pace is probably going to be something very different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably going to scare a few teachers that know, a few students in the back of the classroom that, if left unattended, might not necessarily get the most work done. So I was going to ask you, so that's an interesting problem. And as someone that's run an online class for a while, how do you manage the students that are not necessarily the most self-motivated in this kind of transition?
Yeah. So I teach fully online for a school called Australian Christian College, and I teach Extension 1 online. So I only have 3 students in that class who are all pretty motivated as Extension students. So I was thinking last night as I was reflecting on, what we're talking about today, about what I would do if I was maybe, in the situation of, my middle ability year 9 class or something being put fully online. And I was reflecting on a time when I did first Google Doc with, I think it was a year 10 class. And, everyone's on the Google Doc. There was 24 kids all putting their thoughts into this Google Doc, and it was absolute chaos because they were all typing in different columns. There were, people, some of them were writing messages to each other, which had nothing to do with the work, even though I'm like saying, I can see this, and they were still doing it. They were adding comments, it was just like an absolute crazy, time. So that was the first time I put all 24 kids on a doc. Then I realised afterwards, right, I need to do this in groups. So I put groups of docs on, and then, sort of like had a student leader of each doc who was more responsible for keeping kids, the actual work happening.
Once again,
on the
that
doc.
would not have been me.
So
I'd have to glare at you in the classroom like, Adam, I feel.
You're dividing the mob down.
Could have rose to the occasion, Adam. Can't rule it out.
So I think I learned, you learn pretty quickly as you go. But yeah, to try and engage those kids always online in that way, it will be that to start off with, I think, like it's novel, it's different, and you'll get some interesting behaviours. Equally so, I think if you suddenly manage, if you have a class conference with everybody in, I think that's going to be very, very difficult. But if you can, if you are working where you want students to be face to face and you do want to have like a conference, I'd do it in groups. I'd have groups of students that you talk to for, 5-10 minutes, and then a different group dial in. Because I think having, 20, some classes can be over 30. Having that many kids online with you at once would be really hard. And I think also then it's worth thinking about small bites. If they are going to do an hour of a class, really, I wouldn't think many teachers talk for an hour of the class. So, break it down, either video yourself, use content providers like ourselves who've got video content that you can use, work out ways in which you can give short snaps of content delivery that's engaging, and then let the kids carry on and touch base with them at the end of the class. And I think if you do that in sort of a group attempt, just the same with the group Google Doc, you've got less people to navigate in the moment, and you've also got sort of an element of more control, I guess, over what you're doing. But yeah, teaching online is interesting. And one thing I was thinking of, my students probably won't like this, but I was thinking last night about if I went fully online with some of the lower years, what I'd actually do is I'd actually talk them through the analytics that I can see my end. So like with Atomi, for example, a teacher can see what the students have done, how many times they've attempted the quiz, for example, how many times they've watched the video, how much of the video they've watched. There's so much data that they can see. And similarly so with Canvas. There's so much that you can see on a course level, but on an individual page level, how much a kid has accessed a page, how much a kid has engaged with the course content. And I'd flip that, and I'd have a private session with each kid and show them what I can see, so that they know, in the sense that Big Brother is watching. And then I was going to take this even further. And then I would take a screenshot of those analytics and send them home to parents, so that in time.
But kids' worst nightmare.
We've actually, I've had a couple of emails for a while where we've had schools looking for specific data down to a specific student, a specific thing, and sort of was like, happy to provide it, in this case, but out of question, what's this for? And we've had a few that are saying that, we've had some issues and we want to communicate to the parents exactly what effort these students are putting in and where, and be able to, just throw down the gauntlet and say,
It's interesting you mentioned
the greatest value we can provide is as a disciplinary tool.
Yeah. It's pretty interesting though. Like we have the ability to leverage off big data in the back of Canvas, so you can kind of pull out, you can make your own custom reports, you can pull out all this information. But the interesting thing that we always get asked is, what does this data mean? Like
the $1 million question.
Yeah, exactly. But on the flip side of this, and if we're going to look at something good that might come out of this whole situation, if more and more students inside the system are using this, you've got more and more evidence to drive like what is happening here with this student.
Yeah.
How can I see that in the analytics? And you can help form a path going like, yeah, this is where they should be. They're not here. You know, you mentioned as well, bringing parents in. That's a really important part, especially if they're going to be working from home. Like, we can't obviously make them, you know.
Yeah.
We've all been in meetings where we've gone, I'm just going to turn my video off. I've got to deal with a text message or something. We're not doing that now, by the way. But yeah, it's one of those sorts of things where I think analytics will definitely become way more powerful to the teacher in the classroom.
And I think from...
Yeah, and that's...
Yeah, if we're talking about...
Oh, sorry, no, it's too far.
Sorry, if we're talking about a school rolling that out as well, like I'd encourage schools to, you know, if it does come to the case where online, you know, schools are shut like in Ireland and it is a fully online, you know, model for a while, for schools to make parents aware of what teachers can see, you know, whatever system it is that they're using. One letter going home from, you know, from the school executive to all of the parents of, you know, this is how we're doing it. This is what parents, what your teacher can see on your student. This is when we're going to communicate that to you, etc. Saves every individual teacher explaining what that data means. And then if they do need to check in, you know, if little Johnny is not obviously engaging very much, or, you know, there's lack of you know, he's not logging on or work's not coming in, then it's very easy to send a screenshot home of what that looks like from your perspective as a teacher. And, you know, the parents, as Adam said, would then have a better understanding of what that data does mean if it's been prefaced beforehand.
You can pre-populate, say, you can make a standard template and pre-populate analytics that come out of the system into like a mini report card kind of situation. Like there's lots of different options you could possibly come up with time.
That, I guess that open line of communication with parents that the analytics provides is a very obvious, and we've covered in like they're positive out of the situation. But I just wanted to turn our attention for a second to some of the big problems that might arise, and not just to dwell on the problems, of course, but to provide potential solutions that might arise from a situation where this online learning en masse has to be employed. And a few issues here to raise, and very keen to get your thoughts on solutions. If any more spring to mind, feel free to throw them in. But the first one that I'll throw out is this question around ensuring digital equity amongst students. This idea of whether we can ensure that there are enough devices, if every student has access to a device, the times of the day. There might just be one within a house, and multiple students or multiple children within that house need to use it for their own schoolwork. What can schools do in that situation? How can they best employ online learning resources to combat that potential problem? Sorry, I'll throw that to Adam.
Yeah, that's all right.
I realized I saw some kind of, I heard that pause as we were stepping up to play here. Adam, I'm calling on you.
I think the main thing is as well is that we have got a multitude of different devices. So making sure that the content is being designed and can be seen across multiple devices is also really important. That means you can kind of equate to that share. Does it look the same on a iPad versus a desktop? Does the interaction come the same? Is it compatible across a number of different browsers? Like, these are the sorts of things that, you know, you need to take into consideration as well. I forgot what I was going to say.
I think that's actually like it's a good caveat in a way to bring up, is especially like if you're going for a video conference, it's quite a high bandwidth application, and it requires everyone to be working on this at roughly the same time. So if you've got students that have, not a lot of internet bandwidth that they can use, or if they're, jumping on a hotspot or something like that because they don't have internet at home or where they are at that point in time, like that can set some expectations, or even if there's multiple kids trying to do this at once at home, like that can get tough pretty quickly. And that's why I think like having something pre-prepared in Canvas or in your LMS, and then having those lessons there so that it's not necessarily that it has to be, it has to work for you right now, right at this second. You can, maybe have something a little bit pre-prepared, and when they can access it, they can get to those materials.
Removes that ready-made excuse of students to be like, oh, sorry, internet wasn't working in my house. I'm out.
I was just going to say, that's what I was trying to say before. You got the option to make the content downloadable as well. So they can bring it down onto their device, work on it, and then re-upload it back into those particular sorts of situations. I mean, we're all working on the fact that the internet's not going to break.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
One problem at a time, Adam.
Well, if the whole globe decides to use it, we're going to be putting some serious pressure on the system, right? So it's,
I also,
too much Netflix being streamed around the world.
That's, we don't want to encourage that, Simon.
No, of course not.
Such the teacher in the room, aren't I? Also, I think, so last year when I was doing my master's, one of the... I looked into this aspect of social economic kind of equity. And one of the things I found in my research was that a lot of students, if they don't have access to, a tablet or a computer, ironically have access to a phone, So they still got a lot of areas still have technology in terms of, the device and the phone. So it is, as Adam said, making sure that you can have device compatible things. And I would encourage parents who, that if their kid has just got a phone, to have a look at providers who, like, I think it was Optus was waiving all the you could get extra data at this time, for example. I'm not plugging any particular company here.
With so much fire.
But
Optus, you hear that? If you want to hop on board for a sponsorship gig, feel free. Free marketing.
I think just do your research, because providers are aware at the moment that this is a big thing, and so there are people offering, increased data for no money at the moment, so that this can, be rolled out essentially. So do see what's out there. And I'd just like to say on that note, it is the we said about a silver lining. I am really deeply encouraged by the outpouring of offers within the educational space. Like, if you search LinkedIn, pretty much every ed tech company has offered something in the way of trying to make learning continue for students and for teachers to make this easier, lecturers, teachers, and parents as well. There is such an outpouring of things that you can use to make this online learning, if we move there, much more accessible and much engaging, and in some ways a time savers for teachers. So it is really encouraging to see the educational community banding together in that way.
Yeah, it really is awesome to see. And, the more resources that do it, and the more there's this amalgamation of different things that, as we discussed, fitting different devices, the more creative solutions can come up to combat the problems raised. Unfortunately, I have another one to throw out. We haven't solved it all entirely. Now, again, we're in the area of speculation as to how long these issues might last, for what length of time we might have to contend with just online learning. But if a situation does arise whereby examinations, key exams, or assessments that would otherwise be happening under exam conditions can't go ahead, what can online learning do to best replicate that? Or should it be trying to best replicate that? Do we need to look to different ways of assessment? Sue, I'll throw this one at you initially.
Cheers. I don't think it can be. I think there's going to be a lot of issues there. I think so. The things that would come to mind initially would be very much like when we were doing when we do NAPLAN online. You have to install a lockdown browser so that the kids cannot move from that browser. Now, I've only seen that deployed, obviously, when there's still a teacher in the room, and the lockdown browser, you can still kind of wander around and check them. But I think in order, if it did get to that state, you'd have to have some sort of lockdown browser put onto machines that could control, say, doing a quiz and examination conditions. If you were to use, like the quiz and engine in Canvas, you can put time limits on how long they have to do the quiz. So if you installed a lockdown browser plus a time limit, then that would be a way of, making sure that that was all that was being done. Of course, what you can't police then is that, a kid's not sitting there with the textbook open. It doesn't mean just because they can't search another window on the browser doesn't mean that they're...
Also, many kids have many devices these days as well.
That's true. They've got many devices.
Phone not even under the table, on the table.
Yeah, writing on your hand is so late.
So 80s.
That just showed my age.
So I don't know. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to do that. So maybe it becomes, that it is more of a coursework hand in, and in that case, you'd need to make sure that you've got plagiarism checkers. So again, third-party tools like UniCheck, my personal favourite, and Turnitin, another one, another good one to actually put work through. And obviously, you can do that through the LMS as the main repository. But we're not going to cover the solutions to that. That is a big headache.
Well, my theory is does the world of that exam change? Does it become a thing of like, this is how we used to do it, this is how we do it now, right? Is it acceptable to have a separate device open? Because I don't know about you, but when I come to work, I've got Slack going, I've got Google Calendar going, I've got all these sort of things feeding me with information at a current time.
Yeah.
Well, this is we'll take on a bit of a massive sidetrack, but my brother works in aeronautical engineering, and they have, let's call it high stakes exams, because unfortunately, if something goes wrong,
that title sounded high stakes to me.
it essentially, stuff goes bad, people die. Like there's obviously a very, very different risk dynamic.
Yeah.
And typically in exams that we have at school, we encourage kids, if you don't know something, give it a go. Like, take a swing. How bad can things go?
Yeah.
Very bad by the sounds of things.
Different story.
Exactly. Like we don't generally give kids negative marks.
No.
So how their exams work, quite differently is that it's all open book. And in a case like you have all the resources that you would to have that you would normally be working with, and you immediately fail if you write something down that is wrong.
Right.
And the entire thing. So if there's any case. But they will award you marks if you can say, I don't know that, but here's where to find it, and I'm going to go off and get it. And that's where the resource for that would be. So, for example, if you can say, this should be, attached using these 3 points, but this point, I can't remember the name of what it is, but it would be in the manual under this section down there, labeled with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're making them aware of their own failures and also proving that they know how to resource their actual answers.
Yes.
So, when I was hearing that, I was like, this sounds like a lot more of a proxy of how we work in real life. You have other people that you can ask for support. You have resources to go to, and being able to use them effectively is a massive skill that as teachers, everyone tries to give to their kids.
Yeah.
But obviously it's very hard to do in assessments the traditional way.
Yeah.
So who knows? South Australia already do online exams for a couple of their major SACE, final year certificates. So there's obviously an interesting point there. But you're right. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question of will we ever go back after this?
And that is the question that we have down as last for this discussion. So stop jumping the gun, you guys. But no, we can discuss it now if you like. We can because it is a really fascinating question, isn't it? That's this idea of, it's going to change so much in the short term, but it's natural to assume that that's going to have some knock-on effects for the long term. So if we want to discuss it now, if anyone has any thoughts to that end of how, in what ways education might look different out on the other side, at the other end of this crisis.
Yeah,
don't all shout at once.
No, I think, particularly if it does, particularly if we do follow other countries who have closed schools and we do go to an online space, I think it will, fundamentally change how we do things. Of course, we'll go back to face, but I think it will show that there is a backbone there for online learning, and it'll. If you've got those resources there and teachers have been incredibly upskilled quite quickly, I think it will continue. So I think the future would be more blended learning then. so that, technology is incorporated into the face-to-face space, but with that kind of ongoing skill of teachers. And I've trained a lot of teachers in technology, and one of the things that is always the case is that you do a training session for a day or for in a department meeting, you do it for an hour, and I can get someone who's not tech savvy to say build a quiz, and they do it, they like it, and they're proud of it, and they want to use it. And then they use it, but they don't build another quiz for, say, a month, at which point they've forgotten all about how to do it. And so you have to sort of reteach. And the only way to kind of get better at it is to do it regularly, So like I can whip up online lessons in very quick amount of time because I do it all the time. Same with any kind of skill. The more you do it, the better you get at it. So I think what this will do is, it will be painful a little bit at first, but people will increase in skill exponentially, and then they'll be able to take that skill back into the classroom, and it'll become a sort of second nature. I think it will become very much a part of a fabric of a school, and they will then, if it is the backbone to what they do, we'll be better prepared if there is anything like this again, or if Johnny gets glandular fever, we're there ready to, incorporate all of the different needs of students and the different sicknesses and things like that. So, yeah, I think it will change what we do here on in, because I think everyone's realised the importance of it.
Yeah. I think there's a hump, right?
And sounds like it's a positive change, doesn't it? I mean, out of a negative situation comes this kind of positive move, Adam, where we can kind of combine what we had before the face-to-face element alongside this newfound backbone that Sue is talking about.
Yeah, and also let's just take into consideration how much technology has just changed in such a recent short amount of time. And I think also I feel a little bit for teachers as well, because they've been taught to teach in certain ways, and those ways aren't now reflective of what is actually out there in the market. I assume that the next generation of teachers, as they're taught more online, that development will, a lot easier flow over. But as Sue mentioned, it's, we take at Canvas, we've got the Canvas community, which is a really important place where no matter what user, whether you're a student, a teacher, or a parent or an admin, you can actually go online and see the guides that are associated to your permissions inside the system. Just making it really easy so that people have got the skills to go in there and do that. Creating online courses to onboard teachers in Canvas is something that we've worked really hard on the last 12 months, so that they know they can go, I can't remember how to do it, but as you correctly said, I know where to go and find it. Or there's resources that I can watch that show me how to do it. The big thing I think that's going to come out of this is that before, teachers kind of, in a lot of schools, may have had the option to either, say, use an LMS or use traditional methods, or just use, say, a Google Doc or whatever that may be. By shifting this over, I think you'll see a lot more people asking the questions, because unfortunately, you have to do it. There's no we can't do it half this way. We can't do it half. We've got to focus as a unit. And I think that with the ongoing changes of technology, you look at AI or augmentation or whatever is coming out, there's so many cool things that we get that come across at things like, the use of Google Glasses. I know they kind of tanked the first time, but the future of using things like that might actually be, that might completely change the landscape as well. So it's about being open, I think, and it's pretty crazy when you actually think about it, what's actually capable.
Yeah. Well, I think it's and I'm sure you've probably had really similar experiences with Canvas customers as well. There's always, in every school there's an adoption curve. There's some who are really excited to implement this and do an amazing job of jumping in early and kind of driving that. And then there's, even, within a school or across schools, there's some that sit on the back end of that curve. And, if there's not the driving need to change what they're doing in their regular day practice, or they've got lots of, pre-prepared lessons already, and they don't want to do necessarily the extra work of switching over or being trained in this case, it might take them longer to see the benefits of a program like this in action and to kind of get the real sort of aha moment of oh wow, this is, really not only helping it, making it easier for me to do my job every day, but it's also creating a better learning experience for my students in some of the ways that this can enable. And with a situation like this, you kind of get to the point where you don't really have a choice in some cases. You kind of, whether it's just in preparing for this crisis, or whether it's actually through what, some of the, shutdowns or whatever actually might be implemented in some countries and schools. There's going to be many people that are going to be forced to kind of see how this works in action, to really upskill themselves quite rapidly, to deploy it. And I think a lot more people are going to get to that aha moment where they start to see wow, like having these things pre-prepared for my students, being able to differentiate and personalize a little bit easier, like being able to, measure and track some of these things is going to be really, powerful to them, and that they'll go back into their regular day-to-day classroom and take those skills with them and then, probably push forward from there. So I think we're just going to, essentially, it's going to accelerate that tipping point for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that aha moment that you talk about, I think it's definitely impending. But one kind of issue that comes to mind out of this is when you talk about this upskilling that teachers are facing, it's the speed with which it needs to happen, this sort of real time, on the fly, having to go through that upskilling is such a challenge for teachers to face. So I guess, and I'd love to get all three of your thoughts on this, what advice would you have for a teacher who is maybe not as tech savvy as yourselves, but is faced with having to go through this upskilling? How best can they master the online resources? What can they find within those online resources to help them get through that mastering phase as quickly as the situation may demand? Sue, I'll ask you first, but I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts.
I was thinking about this. So one of the tips I would say before you even start is look at your setup. So I work really productively from 2 screens. And I know, obviously, having been in a fair amount of schools, I've only been in one school that supplied me with a second screen. But if you're trying to learn how to, say you're watching a video that teaches you how to do something and you're building it on the side, it's really important that you can actually have both of that functionality, and you've got one screen open where you're learning and another screen open where you're doing. So, I think a second screen is like $100. So if Officeworks haven't run out, then I would suggest...
You've got the new Apple feature as well. You can AirPlay to your second screen as well. So you can have your iPad that you've always had open, having that running the video, and you can actually do it on your desktop.
Yeah,
which is really
I think it's work on your setup so that you are setting yourself up so that you can best sort of learn. And I think it is going to be a lot of self-teaching, upskilling quite quickly. So, there's so much on, say, YouTube. Pretty much any company go in either produces guides or videos that you can work through to see what is, to step through the skills. And I'd also encourage people to lean on each other, help each other to create resources so that you do less and you share it round. And you can do that very easily within the different systems that you've got, So, and also think of your scope and sequence. If you've got more material on your 4th unit of the year, for term 4, but you've got it ready to go or much more easy to access online, switch it to term 2 and use that now. I think be creative. This is unprecedented times. Be creative about how it is that you're going to, best get content out. And then look, in this room now, we've got a brilliant partnership between Atomi and Canvas, online content creators, great engaging videos, can be really used by teachers, can plug into, an LMS that you've got. Great way of saving yourself some trouble there in actually making content, So look at what providers that you've got and that you've got at your fingertips and how you can actually best leverage the resources that are being offered to you. So do a bit of shopping, see what you can gather together to curate your lessons. Yeah,
it's really terrific advice, and I've realised it's put you guys in a difficult position. I did say I wanted to know people's thoughts on this one. Plus, anything to add, fellas? Sue has covered. Should have left some stuff for the other guys, Sue. Anything to add on top of that?
No, I think that's like realistically that the whole thing is, I guess, in my mind, is that this is going to be almost impossible to do on your own.
Yeah.
If you're trying to suddenly juggle that, let alone the fact that you're also juggling, all the communication and concern and the community that we have, and all those issues that go with that. Teachers are still, beyond keeping learning going, they're still going to have to keep the people going, that are impacted by this. If we're in it together, then it's going to make it a lot easier. So yeah, absolutely. If you can lean on your colleagues, if you can lean on your school to, play that sort of contact role and set really clear processes and communicate clearly with all the stakeholders, from what expectations are for parents and students and all those sorts of things. And your IT department, if you have one.
I was about to say, big shout out to ITs.
Yeah.
They're working hard.
They're in for a rough couple of months. But I'm sure that they're gonna earn every dollar that they get for a while. But yeah, if you've got that, and obviously as external providers, Canvas has an amazing list of resources that I'm sure everyone can dive into, to everything from getting started to creating some really compelling online learning materials. And they also have a great community that have shared what they've done with some of those things that you can dive into, which is really interesting. And obviously with whatever YouTube or the internet at large, or providers like ourselves, or everything, there's a huge library of content out there that can use, so that you're not starting from zero, that you're not jumping in and trying to record weeks of lessons or scribble out notes or drop in some things that might not work exactly perfectly. It'll hopefully accelerate you a lot, so that you can focus on the experience of your students, not just on that huge burden of composition.
So true. Adam, anything to add on top of that?
I'm just going to echo the collaboration state. I mean, there are so many things that cross over between teachers. It's the allocation of, Sue, could you look after this topic? Tom, could you look after this? I'll do this. And then obviously reusing that across the skill board. But yeah, and also whilst we're taking all this into consideration, we've also got, our own personal lives to worry about as well during the situation as well. We've all, we've got parents, we've got friends, we've got family, we've got all these sorts of things as well. So it's almost like a big personal reset to go, right, I know I've got to do this. Yeah. This is what I can do. This is what I'm confident in doing. Let's go. Yeah. And leveraging, and I think inside schools and organisations, I think we alluded to it before, you do have a really strong group that kind of get it in the first instance and run off it. It's getting schools to leverage off them to then manage, funnily enough, as Sue mentioned in the classroom, smaller groups to ensure that consistency is across the board. Because once you start getting that consistency and the students are used to seeing a similar UI, or they're used to navigating similar, the teacher's spending less time telling them how to do it and more time actually doing it. And I think that's a really key point. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Well, listen, got to say, I'm feeling, a little bit better about the whole situation after hearing all of this fantastic words of wisdom across online learning. As Sue and Tom will well know, we usually like to finish with advice or anecdote, generally just about teaching days. But I thought, given the situation that's in it, we might reframe the advice segment and make it a little bit more about advice on how to maintain the human element for teachers within all of this. We've touched on a little bit there, but it's, quite aside from all of the difficulties that online learning will pose in a practical sense, the isolation element of it and all of the pressures that it's putting on teachers, very possibly away from others, is significant. So let's end on a bit of hopeful advice from all three of you. We'll start with you this time, Adam, on how to keep, spirits up, maintain relationships, and amongst teachers themselves, but also with families in a potential time of isolation and difficulty.
Yeah, well, our Canvas, Instructure, has announced that people, there's our European office is closed, our American office is closed, Australia is voluntary, so if you want to come in, you can. But there's little things like we have a webinar room that's open from 1 till 2, where everyone can come in, eat their lunch, have a little bit of banter. And yesterday there was 4 of us in the office, there was heaps of us online, and it was like we were around our kitchen. That human element is really important. I'm a big athlete. I love running. I love swimming. I love doing all that. Funnily enough, swimming is actually really good. It's pretty much like social distancing as it is, because you're kind of going to get anything there. But, we're making things like we're running out in smaller groups. Like we're not stopping what we're doing. We're just reevaluating what's another way of doing it. And the other thing is, really simple, is just making sure you're looking after yourself. Like, you're washing your hands, you're doing all the things that people are asking you to do. And if you feel like it is getting a little bit too much for you, I know this is really hard for some people to do, but take a breath and reach out, whether that's picking up the phone or getting on a conference or just speaking to someone, whether it's family or whatever. I mean, that's really important in these particular times to make sure that you've actually got that connection. Whether that's student, teacher, peer to peer, friend to friend, family to family. I think that's a really good thing that should be, a staple part of everyone's day.
Absolutely. Tom?
I think that this is sort of, I guess I'm trying to find a positive way to say this. I think a lot of people are going to start to feel the slow economic effects of this crisis kind of creep through their communities. And especially, for the communities that are most impacted, hospitality, tourism, we're going to get to the point where a lot of families are impacted by that. And that's going to, it always puts a lot of stress on relationships and on their students as well. But I guess the thing is that schools have always traditionally been a place of community, and they've done a great job of looking after, sort of being that point in the community that people turn to when they need help. And I think if we sort of make sure that olive branch is always out there and that people know that we're in this together and that we're here to support each other, as much as we can, then I think that hopefully we'll make this as best an experience as it can be, given some of the things that are going to happen. So I guess really this thing is just, just sort of be that leading light and look after each other.
Yeah.
Some people might be suffering in more ways than just the health. And we shouldn't let that slide.
Yeah.
I had a friend
absolutely. Very true. Very hopeful words there. Sue?
I think, as Tom said, schools, there's a lot more to schools than just learning. It is a place of safety. It's a place where, kids come together and, there's a lot of friendships that will be missed. And, if we do go into sort of an isolation move. So I think from a parental perspective and a teacher perspective, giving kids time to, chat online and, FaceTime on each other and things like that, like making sure there is a very social connection. If they're doing some of their schoolwork, it's okay that they're all on, FaceTime, actually chatting about what they're doing. I don't think it has to just be, and it shouldn't just be, Johnny with his computer. It needs to be Johnny, his computer, his work, and, like mates around. They still need to have that sort of same level of connection. I guess from that perspective, don't make it all about business. It's got to be maintain those relationships, and teachers checking in, just like you would, the students that you need to check in with, still check in with them. And I think this is a time where it's not going to necessarily matter if, you're calling kids directly or, some of those social protocols that you don't do at schools. I think there might be a sort of relaxation of some of that around this period because, it is important to keep checking in on each other. So, I think we need to operate with grace and humanity towards each other in pretty much everything that we do. It's uncharted waters as such.
Yeah.
But we can make good out of it, I'm sure.
We can. Really, really powerful advice there. Really puts my advice, which was going to be watch lots of Netflix, to shame, guys. You've really shown me on that regard. No, I'm just kidding. Don't listen to that.
Good job you're in Ireland. I can't get you.
I saved that one for when I was out of reach too.
I was about to say, not that Netflix needs the advertising, but maybe we should get a clip out of that.
We've given a few plugs here almost by accident.
Yeah,
we came out with great ideas, but we should have thought about that before we actually.
We'll edit it out. We'll edit it all out afterwards, I'm sure. But no, genuinely, really, really good advice there, and really pertinent words to listen to at this time. So that is all that we have time for today. As always, you can listen to our other episodes of the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to this on. You can check us out on our main site at getatomy.com. But at a time like this, most importantly, look after yourselves, follow the expert advice, keep those hands clean, and look out for each other in whatever way that you can. In the meantime, it is goodbye from Adam.
Thank you very much for having me.
Goodbye from Tom.
See you, Simon. Thanks.
And goodbye from Sue.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
And goodbye from me. See ya.